Chairman, for bringing this to the attention of your committee. And it's deeply appreciated that it's your action. My state representatives from our limits. And I want to just maybe give you a little bit of a background here. I was the founder and chairman of the group called the Detroit Coalition for Compassionate Care, which got medical marijuana on the ballot in the city of Detroit in 2004, and it passed with 60% of the vote. Now, what happened is that vote in Detroit inspired other people, other activists across the state to also go into their own communities, specifically Ferndale, Traverse City, and Ann Arbor. And in Ann Arbor, the measure passed with 74% of the vote. In Ferndale, it passed with 61% of the vote. And in Traverse City, it passed with 63% of the vote. There will be a vote in the city of Flint on February 27th of this year on that very question, and it'll actually do the same thing in Detroit. It will grant an exemption under Flint ordinance for medical use of marijuana, and we are confident of a win in Flint, in that respect. The bill again itself, I would label it as a conservative, kind of bill. It allows persons with serious medical conditions, including like cancer, AIDS, glaucoma, chronic or debilitating diseases or medical conditions that produces one of the following: ataxia, wasting syndrome, severe pain, severe nausea, seizures, including those characteristic of epilepsy, or severe and persistent muscle spasms, including those characteristic of multiple sclerosis or Crohn's disease, or any other medical condition certified by rules promulgated by the Department of Health. That's the State Department of Health. They have the right to add other conditions as science progresses and new information becomes available. And in essence, it protects doctors from any form of liability under state law in that regard. It prevents the prosecution and arrest of patients and their caregivers. Very clear, very plain, very simple. And it has to be an individual under a doctor's care who has had a long-standing relationship with that doctor. You couldn't just get a recommendation over the internet from a doctor in California, okay? You have to have a legitimate doctor-patient relationship. And if that doctor determines that the benefits of marijuana outweigh the possible negative effects, then that doctor can use his or her professional judgment to recommend the use of marijuana. Now, I say recommend, they can't prescribe, because as you all know, federal law does prohibit medical use of marijuana, although it is legal in 11 states at this point, and the Supreme Court ruling was very clear that the states do have the right to determine their own policy, but the federal government does have the right to interfere in that policy. And in any event, historically speaking, there's been very little federal action to actually persecute people using medical marijuana, and I know that's been the case in the 4 cities where this is passed. And I guess, I suppose to enforce that law in California, they're going to have to send in the 82nd Airborne, into California to deal with the problem at this point. But in any event, what we're trying to do here is simply use the legal and legislative process to protect patients and their caregivers who are under the care of a doctor from the fear of imprisonment and fines and ruination of their life. And that's it. That's it in a nutshell. That's what we have to say, and I appreciate that.
Beck, I'm going to ask this question of probably a number of witnesses, but what's special about marijuana? We know that it can be abused, but we also know that painkillers that are legally prescribed by doctors can also be abused. And many drugs that are prescribed by doctors can be abused. What makes marijuana, why do you think marijuana is singled out as a drug that can be abused but must be prohibited at all costs, even where it may be medically beneficial?
It makes no rational sense to me. I can't even answer that. I mean, the facts are that, unlike Oxycontin, unlike morphine, and even cocaine, believe it or not, is a Schedule II drug. A doctor can actually prescribe cocaine. I don't know if you're aware of that, but the thing that's different with marijuana is nobody has literally in history ever died from an overdose of marijuana. I mean, it's impossible. I mean, you can overdose from vodka too, but bottom line,
the effects of marijuana. See, everybody's metabolism is different, is what we're saying, and some people their bodies are very receptive to so-called regular pain medications and so on, produced by Merck and so forth, but others cannot tolerate the effects often of Oxycontin and Vicodin, and they find marijuana is a little bit more milder. It has a lot of properties that these others don't, and the main thing is the fact that you can control the dose of marijuana, where if you take a pill, it's a one-shoe-fits-all approach. So individuals that smoke marijuana or use like what's called a vaporizer, which eliminates harmful tars and toxins from the smoke, can control the dose completely. For some, just a couple puffs, is all they need. And where with a tab of Oxycontin or Vicodin or something like that, no. And there's another drug called Marinol that has properties of THC, which is a so-called legal substitute for marijuana, but some patients report the high and the negative effects of Marinol are just so intense it's practically useless. Again, it's a pill, that cannot be controlled, and this has been, like I say, touted as a valid substitute for marijuana. But again, being a pill, the effectiveness is limited, and it only has THC. It does not have the other properties of cannabis or marijuana that are present and most helpful.
Okay, Representative Sheen had a question.
Are you familiar with what happens if, for example, somebody gets, let's say somebody is dying of AIDS, and they go ahead and they get marijuana on, and they get arrested. Who then starts paying for their care after they're arrested?
Well, I guess it's the taxpayers, from what I understand, unfortunately.
Sheriff's Department and their health care plan now has to pay for that person who was arrested.
Yeah, that's true.
And do you think that fact would influence somebody arresting or not arresting somebody, knowing the fact that that is going to be the case?
Well, yeah, it does. And one of the attack modes, if you could use that term, with the medical marijuana, ballot initiatives that have passed, there was this idea, well, wait a minute, state law trumps these city laws, and therefore these resolutions or initiatives are meaningless. Well, no, they're not meaningless, because the rule in Michigan is that the individual police officer does have discretion. Now, you cannot, a municipality or municipal ordinance cannot tell the police not to follow state law, but at the same time, it gives an honest police officer an option to just let it ride, and many of them do. There's good police officers too, and then there's others that aren't very good. But there is discretion, and I think that if a local sheriff, I know, well, certainly in Ann Arbor and Detroit, the police department made it very clear that they're going to work within the city ordinance. Let's put it that way. But it's up to the discretion, and I would think that a clear thinking sheriff or sheriff's department or deputy, when it's obvious that the person does have a medical problem, they are no threat to society, they would let it ride, as opposed to somebody going out in a car and getting high and whatever.
So if I may, so what you're saying is most likely the person's condition, physical condition, is going to probably affect what an officer may or may not do, and that could probably happen just as many times as if it doesn't.
Yes.
And see, in my mind, what goes through my thought process is quite frankly, my brother died of AIDS, and my brother smoked marijuana in order to take care of some of the nausea and take care of that. And, in one respect, he said, do you have a problem with me doing that? Now, I don't smoke marijuana, nor do I think it should be legalized. And I said, but, I guess, quite frankly, I don't have a problem with you doing this. However, what do you think would be the effects that, if you were arrested or were caught? And he said to me, he says, they're not going to arrest me, and they're not going to take me in, because then they would have to pay for my health care, and then they would have to do this. So he says, I really don't see that as a possibility. I know it could probably happen. I'm sure it's happened in some situations. So as I look at this law, in my mind, I think to myself, most likely, in most situations, the individual is going to go ahead and get the marijuana, and they're going to go ahead and they're going to smoke it, and if it alleviates their situation, then it does. And chances are, I would say more times than not, they're probably not going to be arrested. So then if you just take this on a very basic plane and you say, well, do we need to create a law for something that is already taking place and is going to continue to take place, whether we create the law or we don't create the law? And I just want you to listen to my logic.
Yes, sir.
And so in my mind, when I decide any law, or I go through the process of thinking of anything, I say, do we really need this law? How much is this law really going to have an effect or not have an effect? And so in my mind, I said, I don't really think that this law would have that much of an effect, because I think it's going to continue anyway. And in addition to that, my concern is the moment we open up the door to do it here, there's this other affliction, and this other affliction, and this other affliction. And, I'm tired of opening up doors that let the waters start to come in. And that's my concern.
Well, all I can say is 11 states now it's legal, and in California it's real legal. And in fact, the definition, they name a whole bunch of other, terrible diseases, and there's key wording in there, or any other condition for which marijuana provides relief. It could be a migraine headache, it could be an ingrown toenail, whatever, okay? And, again, in California, and especially San Francisco, which is a city a lot of people love to hate, I mean, the fact is property values are doing real well. In San Francisco, there is not chaos, there is not massive chaos in the state of California. And yes, there are probably some people, abusing the system, but they're doing that now, like Rush Limbaugh and Oxycontin. I mean, come on, it's going to happen. So I think what people want here is just some protection. And there are individuals that have been arrested. We have an individual in this audience that was arrested, and that led to the passage of medical marijuana in Traverse City. It was a direct result of an arrest, and it created a firestorm in that community. It does happen. It is real. And it's highly arbitrary, and it's highly capricious. And that's the reality. And people simply want to have that extra layer of legal protection. And the way this bill is drawn, this is not some California type thing or anything like that. It's very clear that it's for, for seriously ill people. That's all.
Representative Levins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is also directed to my most learned colleague on the other side of the aisle. I don't think that we want, preface it with these comments, I don't think we want happenstance policemen making policy, which is our job, and I don't think we should be in the business of medicine, which is not our job. And so this legislation is very conservative for a very conservative state, which says the doctor and the patient's relationship, and then the doctor so your brother could have, with a clear conscience, because some people even rationalize within themselves and have to go through the turmoil of deciding, my morals say this, but this should be a treatment available to me if it relieves my pain. And so to that, I would say that I think it is incumbent on you as a legislator to make policy and make the tough decisions and not say, it's not being enforced. And furthermore, there are examples of people who have been prosecuted. And there's Henry Ford has a commercial, and they talk about that 2%. He said, what difference does 2% make me? And if it is you that is arrested, your brother may have now. And then there's also certain ethnic groups that are more likely to be targeted, particularly outside of their cities or their residents, who are more likely to be targeted and prosecuted for crimes. So there's also other variables that you may not be considering. And I was going to ask the question to you, Mr. Beck, was going to be, do you know of any examples where people have been prosecuted who were ill and needed the?
Yes, sir. I don't. Is Matt in the room?
No, but I'm here representing them.
Yeah, there's Matt and Charles Snyder has been arrested, and Matthew Barber. He's got multiple sclerosis. He's pretty sick. He can't be here today, but this is his wife.
I don't think that one person it should be incarcerated, and or should be so arbitrary.
Renee has been arrested.
It shouldn't be so arbitrary and capricious as to leave it up to the how a policeman felt that day, or what the budget was in the police department. Could they afford it, or was it, that's not the type of decisions we want our law enforcement officers to be making. So I think we should send a clear message that this should be something left up to the doctor and the patient, and what is the best course of treatment. And
thank you, Representative Levins. Representative Sheen, then Representative Holdenbeck.
Well, then to answer that, to me, it doesn't matter what legislation we pass. Those decisions, will continue to be made. And, whether they should be or they shouldn't be, they'll continue to be so. But as far as policy, I've always been one that when I hear that, boy, if this law helps this one person, or these 10 people, or these 20 people, then we need to pass it. But if this law creates a problem and opens up the gates to all kinds of other things, and now creates thousands of people going to be involved for thousands of different reasons, and it messes up the system, so to speak, and opens up the floodgates, then to me, that's bad legislation. And it concerns me that when you go about doing that I don't want to create legislation that's going to help just a small group of people, when it potentially could create problems with thousands or even 10,000s of people within a system. And that's my thought process. And that's why I most likely will be voting no on this.
Okay, Representative Holdenbeck, but just quick, Representative Sheen, do you think that if we change the law to allow medical marijuana, thousands of people who've avoided trying marijuana because it's illegal medicinally are suddenly going to say, yay, I'm going to try it for the first time?
No, I believe
medicinally allowed?
No, I believe we're going to have 20 bills for 20 other different afflictions now going to be wanting to be able to say, let's legalize it for this, let's legalize it for that. And all of a sudden, it expands.
Should we criminalize all painkillers then? For that same exact reason?
Ibuprofen wasn't criminalized before it became a painkiller.
Well, what about existing painkillers? What about,
should we criminalize alcohol? I mean, the bottom line is, we have a situation where I believe that this is bad policy to expand it. And I believe that the action is going to continue to take place regardless of what we choose to do or not do.
same with all painkillers? Same with other addictive painkillers that we allow? I mean, what makes marijuana special compared to the other drugs that we currently legally allow a doctor to prescribe?
Well, I take ibuprofen, I don't get high. It doesn't impair my driving, it doesn't impair my judgment, it doesn't impair anything.
So that should be the standard. Any medicine that, in any way, like morphine.
My discussion here isn't, that's an interesting point that you're making, but that has nothing to do with what I said. What I said is I believe that this process is going to take place no matter what we pass or what we don't pass today. I believe it'll have little or no effect. And in addition to that, I also do not believe that we should pass it because I believe it opens the door and it just makes it that much, another step towards legalizing another drug that quite frankly, most people aren't using to take care of AIDS or any type of infliction. They're using it to get high. That is the main purpose or the main use of marijuana, just period.
Representative Holdenbeck.
Mr. Chairman, this question is either for you, Mr. Beck, or perhaps if the sponsor of the bill would like to weigh in as well, that would be great. If I understand the language in the bill, first of all, there's an assumption of a relationship between the doctor and the doctor's patient, correct? This is a doctor who understands his or her patient and his patient's medical condition. And the legislation says that it's the professional medical opinion of the doctor that the patient has a debilitating medical condition, correct? So that would be whatever that doctor in his or her professional opinion believes is a debilitating medical.
Right. Yeah, and the benefits of marijuana outweigh the risk.
Okay, so the doctor's not prescribing the marijuana. The doctor's just saying, I think you have a condition that marijuana could help. And again, the assumption is a relationship between the doctor and the patient. A concern that I would have is, could there be a scenario where there's a doctor who not only thinks this is a good idea, but perhaps favors the legalization of marijuana anyway, and who would be willing to grant a medical opinion to anybody who wants one?
Oh, it could happen. It happens all the time. How did Rush Limbaugh get 3,000 tabs of OxyContin? You know, and there's a whole bunch of other abuse of painkillers that the DEA is dealing with all the time that you can get quotes that quote high from. You see,
yeah, I think,
and it does happen, and we're not saying that is an impossibility in this bill.
Expression that might apply here is doctor shopping.
Well, you know, again, it happens. There are crooked doctors, there are crooked police officers, there are crooked politicians. Sure. You know, it's all across the board.
No, wait a present company excluded, of course. Well, I guess that's a concern that I have, and I don't know how that could be addressed, although, of course, if this legislation didn't move forward, that wouldn't be an issue, at least in regard to, you know, a doctor's opinion on marijuana. And the second question I would have is, this legislation basically just decriminalizes the possession and use for a patient who was so described as having a debilitating medical condition. But I don't believe it addresses how the patient would acquire the marijuana.
No, the legislation does.
No, I mean they could grow it. That's one thing that could be done. Yeah.
Not to give a value.
But again, Rhode Island passed the same thing, by the way. It does. Again, it went through the legislative hopper and all the committees and on, and that's.
I guess my concern is the problem that we now kind of create, where it's okay for certain individuals to have the product, but it's still not okay for them to acquire it, because it's still illegal for them to purchase or to acquire it, correct?
Well,
so we've created a kind of a conundrum.
I would not agree with that. The way it's been done in Rhode Island, the way it would be done here. Yeah, I mean they would have to grow it, you know, themselves, and which is an option.
Is that legal?
Well, yeah. I mean,
legal in Michigan?
No, it's not. No. Hear me out, because the fact of the matter is, this person is legal under the law, legal here to be able to possess and use the drug. So if a person is growing marijuana, you know, in their home, in their basement, or their, you know, whatever, then it's presumed that that person, you know, has a medical condition.
Can you get the seeds through a catalog, or?
Well, you know, it's not hard to get, let's put it that way, even now.
Oh,
I mean, you can pass all the laws against it if you want, but whatever, that's another issue. But it doesn't seem to be a problem for people in, you know, in Rhode Island, where that law is law now.
Well, thank you.